Hello there YouTube, my name is Chuggy and today I am playing some Battlefield 3, playing some Conquest on CN Crossing and Rush on Damavan Peak, and today guys it is question time, part 23. Yet again guys, you have submitted 26 superb questions for me to answer this week to 2 Battlefield 3 gameplays. Today I'll be playing Conquest, as you can see here, on CN Crossing. This was a really interesting game, very close. The enemy really brought the fight to us out of the gate and they caught us a bit napping. We had to put a pretty big fight back in to try and get a little bit of control and hopefully turn the game our way. In the second game, Rush on Damavan Peak is a prime example of PTFO and what happens when one team really does it and the other team doesn't. 2 gameplays for you this week guys, and to that I'll be answering your great questions. If you've never seen the series of mine before, this is literally question and answer. If you have a question from anything, be it something in daily, the news, politics, gaming, life, sport, whatever, I'll get to giving you my answer to your great questions. And all you have to do to ask me a question for next time is pop it down in the comments section below. As you heard me say, I have 26 questions of your great questions to get through this week, and they do cover a variety of topics. However, before I get to talking about the questions and the answers, of course, I have to give you guys a massive thank you. Yeah, last question time I announced that I'm now a Machinima network partner, and yeah, just thank you very much guys for your congratulations. It's down to you guys that the channel's growing, the videos are growing and all the rest, and yeah, just a massive thank you for all your great support. I love making these videos, and you know, for instance, your great questions and everything, every question time, it's just astounding. So thank you so very much for your support guys. Awesome stuff is coming in the very near future, and I think I'll be talking about a little bit of it as well in some of the questions. So anyway, with that, let me get to the first great question this week, and it comes from Jack Naven, and they ask, what is the best piece of advice I can give someone about making or designing things for a YouTube channel? You know, backgrounds, intros, outros, that kind of thing. First of all, great question. So the biggest thing I can say is make sure it represents you. It's something that you want. So just in my, day-to-day, how I think, how I do things, I'm pretty binary. I'm pretty, 1-0, yes, no. And to that degree, I've kind of used white and black as an indicator of that. And, just very, very clean, very minimalist, very sort of straightforward. You don't really have to contemplate much. It's there, you just take it as is. As for intros and outros, again, follow that kind of technique, make it something that you're happy with, that you think would represent you, but also bear in mind that, say, an intro isn't meant to be a minute and a half long. I think 5 seconds is about a rightish kind of length. I personally go for one which doesn't actually obstruct what the video is as well. Sometimes you have sort of a whole intro section, mine's just overlaid, and the outro, again, make it something which, again, you're happy with, represents you, puts you across, but also to show off your potential, your skill, whatever, and what you do. The outro, funnily enough, that just came of one night I was bored in my uni room and I designed the first outro and it just went out on a video, and I was just like, I've got to keep doing this, it just worked. And this current one is kind of amalgamation of the previous one and the original, in terms of angled as in the original, but also video position and stuff. And the previous one is kind of an evolutionary thing, but basically, yeah, just make it a representation of you, something that you think represents you, that you're happy with, that you think looks nice, and yeah, just try and grab people's attention with it, grab the eye, make it stand out a bit, and go from there. So hopefully that will help you. It's not easy. I won't tell you how I make my outros for now, but you will laugh. I don't use any video editing software to do it. You'll be kind of like, well, how on earth do I do that? So perhaps that's a question for next time, but yeah, it's a really tricky thing to get right. But the biggest piece of advice I can give you is make sure you're happy with it, and it represents you. Don't necessarily copy people just because they're doing it. Make something which you think represents yourself, a bit of your personality. So there you go. Great question, Jack. Thank you very much for it. Next question comes from Eagle Nova 1, and they ask, what is my favourite bolt for the crossbow, my favourite primary weapon, and favourite secondary weapon? And I'll assume this is in Battlefield. Well, favourite bolt is actually the standard bolt, just due to the fact that, well, it's kind of in a weird sort of neutral position. You know, the other bolts kind of have purposes. You know, you got the balance bolt for long range, sensor bolt for sensing, explosive bolt for explosives, obviously. I guess the standard bolt is more of an anti-infantry kind of thing, and I tend to find that quite useful. For instance, when I play recon, when I have the crossbow, I will use the crossbow as a fireable knife, and I've said this before. Because if I see two guys, I can crossbow one, knife the other, and perhaps, you know, switch to pistol, get any more who turn up, who knows. This gives you a bit of versatility, I should say. So yeah, the standard bolt, I would say. Favourite primary, that's a tricky one. I'd have to say the L96, purely because I've used it so much, I'm just used to it. Although I must admit, the M48-5, which I've been using a lot as of late as kind of a rifle rather than a sniper rifle, has been impressing me greatly, I'll say that. So I'll sell the L96 on the primary front, and the M1911 you see me use here is my favourite secondary by far. The power, the magazine size, I just don't think you can beat it. Kind of sits in the middle of the pistol extremes. You know, you've got your 44 Magnum with 6 shots, very high power, and then you've got your, you know, M9s and everything else with 15, 16, 17 shots with relatively low power. And then you've got the automatics, of course, which personally I don't use because I just don't like them. So there we go. So yeah, there you go, Eagle Nova. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, it's always fun to try and assess really what weapons you class as your favourite. You know, the M1911, for instance, I not only like it as a handgun, but I can use it, so that's like a win-win. Anyway, I digress. Thank you very much, Eagle, for the great question. Next question comes from Chip Off the Block 99, and they ask, since there are so few regulation changes for Formula 1 into the next season, being 2013, do I think that we'll get a repeat of this year's racing, i.e. it being very, very close between the teams? Well, it's an interesting question, because, for those of you who don't follow Formula 1, a few years back we had a major rule change. The cars changed, the way that they had to be built were changed. Lots of little rule changes, which meant basically everyone went back to day one. They had to redesign their cars from scratch. And a few teams, Brawn in particular, you know, team which was born out of the ashes of another team which quit the sport the year before, went on to win the World Championships for both drivers and constructor because they found this thing called a double diffuser, and it was legal in the rules, and they won loads of races as a result. The rules haven't changed as much since, and last year, because the rules had basically not changed at all, the racing was very close. We had 7 different winners from the first 7 races, and I think that sort of says enough about the closeness. Now, actually, I think this year it's not going to be as close. Some teams had to fight right to the end of the season to secure the positions they had. For instance, you know, Sebastian and Red Bull were racing right up until Brazil, along with Ferrari and Fernando, to try and take the driver's title. And, you know, for instance, Adrian Newey has come out in the press and said that has affected the Red Bull's development for this year, so they might be a little bit slower. I think the real dark horses are going to be some of the guys in the midfield who have had the chance to get used to the rules and regulations now, you know, your Lotuses, your Force Indias, etc. Keep an eye on those guys. The top teams, I think, will always be, relatively speaking, up there, although I expect Ferrari to be strong. Just on the nature of Ferrari, they have insane money behind them, and a lot of very talented people. McLaren, I expect, will be up there, although, of course, Sergio is a bit of an unknown in a very fast car. Yeah, so I think we'll have close racing, but not as close as last year, let me say that, and it'll be interesting to see how the pecking order changes as a result. Should be interesting to see. Anyway, thank you, Chip Off the Block, for the great question. Next question this week comes from Dr. BCDPS3, and they ask, do I play any indie games on PC, and if so, which? Well, I do play 2 in particular, which I quite like a lot. Minecraft, which is, you know, everyone has heard of Minecraft at this point, but one other which I don't think many people have heard of, which is a great game and you should check it out. It's called Kerbal Space Program, and basically it is build your own rocket and send things, or Kerbals they are, up into space, to the moon, to the sun, wherever. It's a really awesome little game, which, you know, I just stumbled across it thanks to someone mentioning it, a friend of mine mentioning it. I was kind of like, this seems interesting. And it's got something like, you know, it's got that Minecraft kind of, well, let me just do this, and just let me do this. Because you build a rocket from parts, you actually fly the rocket up into space, you can go to the moon, etc. You can build space stations and whatnot. It's just a lot of fun. If you're into engineering and well, space, for instance, I cannot recommend checking it out enough. Just put Kerbal Space Program into Google, you should find it. Great game, and yeah, I love playing it. I like engineering, so that's where my interest in it comes from anyway. So yeah, there you go. 2 indie games for you. Well, recommend them both enough. You've heard of one. Kerbal, perhaps, maybe not. Who knows? But yeah, there we go. Thank you, Dr. PCDPS3, for the great question. Next question comes from Blown Tire, and they ask, do I think that the explosive bolt in Battlefield 3 needs a damage buff? Good question. So, the explosive bolt is kind of a sensitive topic, so it's very effective against, say, helicopters. I think it doesn't need a change there. I think it could do perhaps a bit more damage to tanks, personally, but I think it's spot on for infantry. Obviously, with a fireable explosive like that, you know, a relatively large amount of explosive, that can be abused. Just think USAS 12 frags from before the very first patch. It just dominated. I think they've got it right on the infantry terms. I think it could do a bit more damage to APCs and tanks, but I think it's also spot on for the helicopters. So, kind of a yes and no kind of answer there, Blown Tire. Interesting one. And just in general, I'd be curious to perhaps see how changing that would actually affect the battlefield, to be honest, because you don't tend to see too many people use the explosive bolt unless they see a tank or something, so I'm not sure. Certainly not on infantry. I think infantry's fine, helicopters are fine, perhaps on the vehicles. That would perhaps need a bit of tweaking, I don't know. I'll say that much. Thank you, Blown Tire, it's an interesting question. Guys, what do you think? I personally don't think it does, to be honest. Maybe a bit more on vehicles, but I digress. Great question, Blown Tire. Interesting one there. Next question comes from, well, is echoed by 2 people. So the question comes from, I'm going to take your name, but had HD, great name, but also is asked by Chris Halliwell, and they ask, Chuggy, rugby union or league? So I'm a rugby union person myself. That's just, it's the sport I play, you know, it's the version of rugby I played at school. It's the version of rugby I just tend to follow. Although I do have quite a lot of respect for rugby league. It's, you know, for those of you who don't know, the rules are slightly different. There are, you know, different number of players. It's a lot more physical, really, as well. But I've just followed union personally, and I've never really got into league. So there you go, rugby union for me, I'm afraid, guys. And there we go. Thank you guys for the question. And yeah, just it's interesting, the differences, really, but never mind. I digress. Let me get on to the next question. It comes from Chris Cross Zero, and they ask, with the 2014 championship, Formula 1 championship, this is set to have radical rule changes. Yes. Which teams do I think will have the advantage going into this season? Well, as I've just been saying, not many rule changes as of late. 2014, big changes in the rules in the near future. It's going to be much like Brawn. So Brawn, literally, they were Honda backed out of the sport because they were losing money, and they'd invested a year into the 2009 car, and the result was that car won the championship. It is going to be a case, I think, of teams going, right, enough of 2013, we're going to focus on next year. And I think, well, as you say in the question, I think Ferrari are going to have a real march here. But you really never know. As I said before, I think some of the midfield teams are going to surprise with the pace they've got. And it might make people have to carry on developing this year's car right to the very end. Who knows? I'd keep an eye out on some of the lower teams. Take Caterham, Marussia, because obviously, to be brutally frank, they won't be winning races. Just you watch, I've said that, they're going to go and win everything now. And I reckon that if they, you know, bide their time, get a decent car this year and focus on next year, they could really jump up into the midfield. Or I hope so. Caterham should have done by this point. I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty disappointed in their performances so far, but never mind. So yeah, I think out of any of the big teams who can make or take advantage of the changes in 2014, Ferrari will be one. But also keep an eye out on some of the smaller teams who perhaps don't have anything to really go for this year. I think we're just going to have to wait until Melbourne to get a real definitive answer of where people are. Oh, I do like the run-up to start for Formula 1 season, all the unknowns. Thank you, Chris Gross, for the question. Next question comes from Shadow Wolf, and they ask, what game this year am I most looking forward to? Well, you want to know something? This is really tricky, because there are a load of really amazing games coming out this year, likes of GTA 5, Battlefield 4, but the game I'm looking forward to the most, I'd have to say, is Grid 2. And Grid 2 is a racing game. It is a sequel to Grid 1, surprise, surprise, and that has its roots in the TOCA Touring Car Championship games, which is touring car racing. And I sort of had my eye on Grid 2 just because, well, it's a racing game. It's made by Codemasters. It's a tin top type racing. Predominantly, you do have open wheel in there as well, actually, to be fair. And Codemasters have been very, very good at that. But when I went and played Grid 2 at Eurogamer, it really got my attention. Honestly, the physics, you just would... you can't go back to other racing games once you've driven Grid 2, because you just go, well, where's the physics? For those of you who don't know, the game engine, the physics engine in the game runs at 1,000 hertz, where instead of like 60. So if you're doing 60 miles an hour, no, what was the example I gave? I think it was 150 miles an hour. At 60 hertz, you'd sample the physics around the car every meter. Their system, it's every centimetre. That makes a big difference, trust me, and you feel that. So, Grid 2 for me, the racing nerd in me is going, yeah, it should be a lot of fun, and it is a lot of fun, at least what they had in Eurogamer. So there you go, Shadow Wolf, thank you for the question. Grid 2 for me this year. Next question comes from ProCyrus10, and they ask, one question, what is the name of the song at the end of my video? And you want to know something, I've had this question a lot. It's actually in the end of the video, if you look carefully. It's called Paris Starlight by Dan Guturo, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And I have to put that little sort of credit there as part of sort of the terms and conditions of using the song. But it's from a website called Shockwave Sound. They sort of produce royalty-free music. And it's a catchy song, I quite like it. And it added something when I was putting together this little outro of mine. And it has stuck, basically. So, yeah. Paris Starlight. That's only the 30-second version. There's a minute-long version. There's no words or anything. It's all instrumental, but I quite like it. So there you go, ProCyrus. Hope that answers the question for you. Next question comes from Lissol, and they ask, what is my opinion about the new Grand Theft Auto 5 having all the previous GTA maps combined into one? Well, I didn't know it was going to have all the previous GTA maps combined into one. I thought it was just going to be Los Santos. Interesting if true. Los Santos, well, so the thing with Los Santos with me in San Andreas is, well, it was back in the PS2 days, so obviously there wasn't as much they could do in terms of drawing massive cities and everything else. They had a whole other state to build, but Los Santos to me always did feel a bit small. You had sort of distinct areas, and that's all it really seemed to be. What I'm looking forward to is having a much more, I don't know, expanded city, a lot more to sort of see and do, and it just feel a bit more complete. I don't know. But if all the maps were in there, well, that's going to be interesting. Obviously we've got 3 protagonists, which is going to be interesting. That's the first for the GTA series, having multiple protagonists in the same sort of story arc or whatever else in game, and you play them all. Obviously with GTA 4 we did have Nico and the rest, but I'm looking forward to GTA 5. If all the maps are going to be in there, that's going to be interesting, I'll say that. So thank you, Lasol, for the question. Next question comes from the Las Vegas Outcaster, and they ask, how come so many games these days tend to focus on single player? If you've got a friend coming around, how come, that there are no real decent multiplayer sort of on the couch kind of games? And it's a really good point. I mean, back in the day, that makes me feel old, when I had, PlayStation 1, Game Boy, whatever else, the games tended to be designed for a single person, but they always allowed, if you will, the opportunity to have multiple people play the same game. For instance, on the Game Boy, you could have, say, Pokemon, and you could trade Pokemon between one another. Or if you're playing, say, TOCA Race Driver, or the TOCA Touring Car Championship, there was 2-player modes and all the rest. I think with the rise of online, as it were, of people playing online, it's kind of become less of a requirement to have on the couch multiplayer. But having said that, I do like having the ability to have friends around and play games. I mean, for instance, a few weeks ago I went go-karting, and people came round to my place because I was just so happened to live close to the place where we were going to go go-karting, and I was kind of like, well, what can we do? I mean, all my games have got a single player, and what we did is I set up my steering wheel, we went on Gran Turismo 5 and just did laps in a go-kart, sort of watching each other, which in its own way was fun. But if we could have multiple people in go-karts, obviously that could be, have some interesting lines of fun. I don't know. I digress. But yeah, I do get your point, and it would be nice to have a bit more focus on more than one person on one console. You do see that a bit, I guess, with Call of Duty, because they do allow multiple people to play on sort of the same multiplayer game, but not quite the same. Anyway, thank you very much, Jonathan, for the question. Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something which perhaps will be looked at with new consoles. Who knows? I mean, the Wii U's got its funky little tablet controller thing. Yeah, let's just see what the new consoles bring and what opportunities. Let's see. Thank you for the great question. Next question comes from Orange Ice, 8, and they ask, what am I most excited for, like hoping for in the end game DLC for Battlefield 3? Put simply, capture the flag. An amazing game mode which has its roots in Battlefield. It's just that Conquest tends to be played more. Back on my foray with Battlefield 2 Modern Combat, we had Conquest and Capture the Flag, and Capture the Flag was basically only played to get points. Now, I should probably explain what the value of the points were. The way that the ranking system worked in Modern Combat was point-based. You had to get a certain threshold of points per hour to maintain your rank, and that kind of meant you had to consistently play well. Capture the Flag offered the quickest way to get the most points in a short amount of time. Bear in mind that a single kill, a single capture in Conquest back then was 1 point. A flag capture was worth 5. And basically you used to have a lot of very high level guys in a lobby fighting to try and just even pick up the flag. I think that was worth 2 points, so it was worth doing. So I just have fond memories of the madness of trying to defend, capture and all the rest of the flag, and it should be a lot of fun in endgame with motorbikes, with the big open maps. It should be really interesting to sort of have almost this Conquest type game mode where the flag is moving all the time. So I'm looking forward to Capture the Flag, I think is the best way I can put it, and it should be a lot of fun. So thank you very much, Orange Ice, for the great question. Next question comes from Chris Halliwell again, and they ask, what do I think of handheld consoles? Well, I'll be frank, I think they've had their day. Given that mobile phones and things are so powerful, and also, put frankly, they're a bit more versatile, they're a phone, they're a way of getting on the internet, whatever else, I think that consoles, dedicated handheld consoles are going to be meeting the end of their lifespan. For instance, I'll go back to the Game Boy. When I had my original grey brick massive Game Boy, there was nothing else like it. It was one of pretty much the only ways you could play a game on the move. There were no mobile phones available to the public en masse, which could play games of that, quality, whatever else. Whereas I could get my iPhone out right now and play a 3D FPS, no problem. That is just a crazy feat of technology which has happened in the last few years. So I do think that they've had their day, and I think we won't see, for instance, Sony produce another PSP or PS Vita. That's kind of been a bit of a flop for them, to be brutally frank. And, well, it'll be interesting to see what Nintendo do. Obviously, they control the handheld market at this point. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle the future. So I think they're personally done. We'll just have to see what happens next, what the game companies come up with to try and keep them relevant. And hopefully something cool will come out of it. We'll have to wait and see. Thank you again for the great question, Chris. Great question. Next question comes from Patrick von Worden, and I hope I said that right. And they ask, for Formula 1 2013 produced by Codemasters, what would I like to see a focus put on? For instance, 2012 did have a bit more of an online focus, fixing things, tweaking things in that regard. Or would I prefer it to be focused on single player, whatever else? I'll be quite frank, I don't want any focus. I want bug fixes. So the thing which annoyed me so much with F1 2012 is that there was a lot of really valuable things added, park ferme, crossing the white line, all that kind of stuff. Lots of little things which are correct, are good, but because there were so many, it was so unpolished, so many bugs, so many annoyances, I just couldn't appreciate any of that. So frankly, I would prefer to see no new features whatsoever, updated cars and tracks, whatever, fine, you have to do that bit, but bug fixes, to spend the time on getting the game to a point where you can appreciate all the hard work they put into it. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. And to be honest, I'm still in two minds about if I'll even pick up 2013. I'll have to wait and see until Codemasters start releasing a bit more information about it. But this is the really annoying thing, though. I'm stupidly hyped for Grid 2, a Codemasters racing game, but I'm really anti F1 2013, a Codemasters racing game. If only the two could meet in the middle, I don't know. Or, if they use the new physics engine. Ooh, I say, that could be interesting. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, bug fixes. Bug fixes, polish is what I'm after in 2013. They do that, I'm in. So there we go. Thank you very much, Patrick, for the question. Next question comes from BobNob1964, and they ask, what do I think about the Rugby World Cup coming to the UK? I am psyched. I've been to Twickenham a few times to watch England play the Barbarians, and there's nothing quite like the atmosphere of England playing at home, I guess, really. And to have the whole Rugby World Cup here, it should be freaking awesome. Now, you kind of go on to mention about sort of stadium choices or location choices. I haven't actually really heard much about that, although I'd hope, you likes of Twickenham, etc., Murrayfield, whatever might get picked. Well, mind you, Murrayfield, maybe. Anyway, I'm not sure if it's an England World Cup or a UK World Cup, we'll see. But, yeah, as long as, obviously, it's a suitable venue, you can get to it, there are plenty of seats or whatever, I don't particularly mind where it goes, to be honest, although the final has to be at Twickenham. Has to be. And I expect the tickets are probably going to be ridiculously expensive, so never mind. I probably won't be able to afford to go to that, but I do plan to see if I can get to as many of those matches as I can. Rugby is an awesome sport. Nothing quite like it, so there we go. Thank you, Bob Knob, for the question. Really very excited about that coming. I think it's 2015? There we go, right? Yeah, because it's 2011 for the last one. There we go. Excellent. Thank you very much, Bob Knob, for the great question. Next question, or next few questions I should say, comes from Miles Bentley, and they ask, what do I prefer, close quarters or armoured kill? I'd have to say, purely because I am more of an infantry fighter, and obviously with console we only have 24 players, I'd have to say close quarters, purely because there's a bit more action, a bit more pace, whereas armoured kill, I can work with the vehicles, got no problem with the vehicles, but they're pretty big maps for console, let's be frank. I mean, it could be, I must admit, I think I've said this already, I was kind of expecting it to be a little more quiet, a little more less actiony. I don't know quite what the right way of putting it is. It's not without action, but I prefer close quarters out of those two, because it is more infantry focused. There's just a bit more going on, a bit more to keep you on your toes. So that's that one. Do I think that updates or map packs would be better, and if they were more regular and say just maps? Tricky one, that. I personally, I do like new things being added to the game, so weapons, game modes, whatever. But I obviously, I would love to see a few more maps. And if you remember back to just after Battlefield 3 was released, there was loads of sort of speculation. Well, the all-American map pack, we're going to have fights on the Hudson River as we try and take New York or whatever else. Yeah, there's Battlefield. So the thing with Battlefield, of course, is it's very varied. You can have massive open spaces with vehicles. You can have tiny indoor buildings. Battlefield accommodates it, just in the nature of how it is, and the class play and everything else when it works. It is superb. I don't think anything can beat it, and it can have a battlefield on any scenario, and I think it would work. I think on that grounds, yeah, more maps would be cool. Although you got to weigh that up against weapons and game modes, whatever your preferences are. I'm personally keen on the weapons and the game modes, so I'd probably say the way that they've been doing it, I'm more keen on. And finally, basketball or baseball? I'll be honest, I'll have to say basketball purely because I've played it. We don't tend to play much baseball over here in the UK, and basketball I was always pretty good at. I'm relatively tall, so doing the dunks, I could do the dunks. And I do remember one point when I was at secondary school, equivalent to high school if you're in the States, we had sort of an inter-form competition, inter-year competition, and we got to the final. My form got to the final. We didn't win, but it was a hell of a ride, and I did score a few baskets, and it was good. Fond memories. There we go. Thank you very much, Miles, for the great question, and also that weird sort of moment of recollection and reminiscing. Excellent. 1, 2, 3, James. 1, 2, 3, James. 1, 2, 3, James. 1, 2, 3, and they ask two questions. First of all, when I start live streaming, will I be doing sort of live question times and everything else? Yes, I will be. On top of that, you'll probably see some live challenge Chuggies as well, where I get the challenges from the stream and all the rest. So yeah, you will be seeing some of that stuff very shortly, and I'm just literally working on ironing out a few of the issues with live streaming. I think I'm pretty much there. I'm just having a few issues with sound, of all things. Everything else should be sorted though, so that should be coming very shortly as soon as I get that sorted, which will be awesome. And finally, they ask, since they'll be getting a gaming PC soon, it's called. have I, had any problems getting used to a keyboard and mouse compared to a controller? Well, yes and no. So I program computers for a living. I'm a software engineer, so I'm kind of used to working with a keyboard and mouse. But I must admit, I was a bit alien trying to, play an FPS or whatever else. Properly, seriously, for any decent amount of time when I first started. What I decided to do was actually to play a game which was, if you will, tricky and would punish me to try and get me out of bad habits, and that was Counter-Strike. So I started with Source, then Global Offensive came out, and I've basically gone from there, and it is becoming a bit more natural, which is nice. It does make going back to console a little bit tricky. I'll say that it does. The controller a few times as of late has felt a bit alien, but you do get used to it. It's like riding a bike. So yeah, I did have a little bit of an issue, but basically find a game that you play a lot. It will take quite a while to get through and used to it, but you get there. You do. So it's a little bit of it's one of those situations really where you just got to stick with it. Take the short-term pain for the long-term gain. So there you go, Nate James. Hope that helps you. Thank you very much for the questions. Next question comes from Didza Bakes, and they ask, well, two questions. First of all, what do I think about the Formula 1 driver Mark Webber, and do I have any advice for editing videos because of massive file size? Well, I'll answer the second part of your question first. So, the video file size, you're just going to have to work with it, I'm afraid. So, for instance, the two gameplays you've seen here, the first one I think was 14 gigabytes, and this one is 5. Basically, the best piece of advice I can give with the video editing front is always go for the highest quality. And I have had to buy extra hard disks and the like to accommodate that. That's just the way it goes, and obviously when you then render that out and code it into its own little video file, it'll come down in size massively. But yeah, get those big video files, work with them, get the best quality out of them. And if that means having to get extra storage, do that. I've got a Firewire 800 disk here, super fast, and it does the job very nicely. 2 terabytes. I haven't had to delete anything from it in 9 months. So, obviously delete what you're not using, that kind of thing. But yeah, bigger hard disks are the way to go on that one. And as for Mark Webber, I have a lot of respect for Mark. He seems like a really nice guy. He's been very unfortunate. He has slugged it out for Red Bull as a driver there for a very long time. Well, he was there back in the Jaguar days. He's a very, very good driver. I think his debut was in a Minardi at Melbourne, and I think he came 5th. And this was back when Minardi, well, first of all, existed, but, they were not a top-tier team at all, and he came 5th in his first race. He's a very talented driver, and now that he finally has a car to do something, I do feel bad for him that young Vettel has had more of the attention, I'll say that. So I think he's a massive talent. I really do back him for this year. I wish him all the best, and yeah, there we go. Great driver, and more hard disk space I think is the way to go. So thank you very much, Didza, for the great questions there. 3 questions now from Maverick SASR, and they ask, would I be for Battlefield 4, say, with 64 players? Absolutely. More the merrier. Having played some 64-player Battlefield 3 on the PC, yeah, it's a crazy fun house, and it is good fun. And besides, it should also offer some mutual benefits. If it's 64 players on all platforms, then the map can be more tailored to that, whereas at the minute, for instance, Caspian on console can be a little bit, quiet. Etc. So yeah, I'm all for 64 players on console. Will I be posting some DayZ gameplay shortly? Yes, I will be. I'm actually working on something right now. It's just taking a little longer to edit, but I will be. And finally, do I have any advice on jets and helicopter combat? Well, first of all, if you're in a helicopter, do not fight a jet. If you're in a jet, do fight the helicopters, because basically the helicopter is, helicopter, as you can imagine. Fast jet with missiles can, in one run destroy a helicopter. Helicopters focus on the ground. If you see an enemy helicopter, obviously try and get above them, I'd say is the best thing, and try and get a missile away at them. If they flare, then just wait for the flare to wear off and fire the second missile. Have a gunner you can talk to, of course, at all times. That's always very useful, and yeah, go from there. So jets, eat those helicopters up, obviously, protect yourself from other jets, but helicopters do not engage jets. It's just not a viable solution. So there we go. Unfortunately, there's one more question from Super Bat Robin, which I'll answer in the comments, but there we go. 25 great questions, and that will conclude this question time. So anyway, guys, great questions. Thank you very much for those. If you have, again, anything you would like me to answer, all you have to do is pop it down in the comments section below. and I'll get to answering it next question time. If you like this video, all you have to do is, well, if you'd like it, that would be awesome. If you disliked it, please do dislike it so I know that you did that. And if you are new to my videos and you'd like to see some more content from me, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. So anyway, guys, as always, thank you so very much for watching. I've been Chuggy, and I'll see you next time out on the battlefield.